I don't know if there's a better place to start with this one, which is Marauders or Marauders, however you want to pronounce it, than to Paul's white suit, which is interesting. Everyone seemed like they had...
Is that like the difference between mariner and mariner?
Or just the cow aspect of this one is underappreciated, and there's a lot of Marauders and Boimlers. There was something funny. I can't remember. Boimler in the auto text generator thing that I use for the clips came up with something strange. How you pronounce Boimler, but that's really neither here nor there. Excuse me. To Paul's white suits, are you a fan or not?
Well, it's nice to know that she's got something that won't draw heat when they go to the desert planet again. She learned from the desert planet that they went to that she needs something a little bit more breezy. Same with the other guys. They've got some nice khaki going on.
A light khaki. This is a super beige episode. Very beige palette that they're working with. And I don't know if the costumes are new or if it was just the kind of episode where it's focusing on. I think T'Pol's is new. I don't think I've ever seen her wear that before. I assume that's her go out and visit places outfit at this point, but I don't really have anything else to say about it. So we can just get into Marauders. So we'll take a break. We'll play a clip from the episode. We'll come back and we'll break it down.
So this is your exclusive arrangement?
It's not your concern.
How long have these bullies been pushing you around?
5 seasons. They take all the first yield deuterium we can extract.
Hold still.
After they leave, we manage to pull a few thousand liters out of the deep strata, but it takes weeks and it's so full of impurities we can barely refine it.
Still brings in a decent price. We make enough to get through the winter.
Barely.
Okay, so Marauders is the 6th episode of the 2nd season, aired on October 30th, 2002, which might have been Halloween. Or there's 31 days in October, maybe. Teleplay goes to David Wilcox. I feel like my commentary here is slow to start, but
you're not exactly the New York Times editorial right now, but we'll get there.
Teleplay goes to David Wilcox. Story goes to Rick Berman and Brandon Braga. Directed by Mike Vehar. The in-universe date is unknown, but it's 2152. I blame the episode, quite frankly, for any commentary issues that I have.
Fair. That's fair.
In this episode, Enterprise discovers a deuterium mining colony that is being controlled by Klingon marauders. The crew trains the colonists to defend themselves and prepare for battle against their Klingon oppressors. Right out of the Progressive Handbook for Political Action, I guess, right here. I thought this was a quintessential Enterprise episode. I thought that this was so Enterprise in pretty much every way that if someone were to ask me, like, show me what an Enterprise episode is to this point through like 1 season and 6 episodes of Enterprise, I think I'd show the Marauders. And this is an episode that also calls into question our whole rating system, where after we finish recording this, I will never remember anything that happened in this episode, but I will remember a night in sickbay, which we gave a 1. But this one's not a 1 to me, just based on how I look at the rating system. It's not that bad, but this is so forgettable. This is such a forgettable episode, just so boring. Well, I don't know.
I'll actually take the other side of that, which is I find it very easy to remember what happens in this episode. In fact, as I was watching it, I fell asleep about halfway through, and I woke up right at the final scene with Trip and the kid in the shuttlecraft, and I said, I have a feeling I know exactly what happened, and I went back and I watched the half that I missed, and I was right, because they've already reached the point in their show where they've hit we're out of ideas, let's just do the Magnificent Seven. And this is like the most boilerplate Western pastiche that you could, if the only difference is, if this was the original series, Star Trek, they would have ended up in a literal Western town. Right. Like the planet they went to would be like, we're just this mining town in the middle of this galaxy that just happens to look like the American West. But they chose for the Burning Man aesthetic instead. And it's just so by the numbers. 7 Samurai, Magnificent Seven, The Three Amigos. It's like the same shit. It even has my favorite scene from those movies and movies like that, or stories like that, where they teach. It was at least a little bit more believable in this one, actually. But the scene where they teach an entire town some sort of self-defense thing that usually takes like years to master.
Yeah.
Then everybody ends up learning it in about an hour and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's my take on my sort of thoughts on this one were if you read the log line where you pitch this, so if you're pitching this and you're just like, Archer and the Enterprise discover a colony that's being attacked by Klingons, they teach the colonists how to defend themselves, and the producer who's buying it goes, that sounds great, like what else is going on? You go, nothing. And they go, there's no second layer? Are the colonists like tricking the Klingons? Is there some kind of deceit going on? You go, no, absolutely not. They go, fantastic. That sounds like an Enterprise episode if I've ever heard one. There's just there's no subtext. There's nothing going on beneath it. And it also falls into the other Desert Planet episode. The second half is just montages that are 20-minute montages where you don't learn any. There's like nothing going on except for the training sequence and then this fight sequence. And it's just so empty.
Even the thing with the kid and Trip, it's like the least possible effort they could have put into that storyline, because I think they only interact in like 2 scenes.
Yeah.
And so by the end of the thing, it's like, are you ever going to come back? I'm going to miss you. And he's like, I don't know. We got to get this energy at some point. So maybe we'll be back. It's like, dude, you there's no story here. There's no like heartwarming connection that you've made with this kid or anything. It's just like, that's one of the things that they do in these stories. I will give them credit, sort of, for not entirely doing Magnificent Seven, because they do throw in a little bit of Blazing Saddles, where they pick the town up and they move the town and create a fake town. But aside from that, it's just like, it's, I don't know. This is another one where I went into it and I'm like, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to try and wipe my mind of all my preconceptions of this show. And within 10 minutes, I was just like, okay, I see what's going on. This is going to play out exactly how I think it's going to play out. I think the thing for me is you can't do this story in the 21st century without some sort of spin on it.
Right.
I feel like did we have a similar problem with the episode of The Mandalorian that was very similar? That one at least was like visually interesting because they had the ATST and the woods and shit.
Oh, right. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
But it's pretty much the same idea where it's like he ends up, I think there was a little bit of subversion there, but like you can't play this Western stereotype story completely straight especially in a science fiction show.
Yeah.
In the 21st century. You just can't do it.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say that it's a bad episode, but it has far too little story for 45 minutes, which is an Enterprise kind of special, I think, at this point. It's, the first half is fine, I guess. It's interminable in the second half. It's just like the most rote outcome that you could expect from this, where the training sequences are just so boring. And Hoshi, just to give Hoshi a scene, she teaches that guy how to like not squeeze the trigger before you've pointed at the target, which is gunfire 101, I suppose.
Hoshi, who has never shown any inkling of being good with a gun, who has like actively avoided stuff like this in the past because she doesn't know how to handle herself.
She can talk him out of it. It has a bad action sequence where no one dies, despite the fact that this is supposed to be the most dangerous battle against these Klingon Marauders that this colony has ever seen.
Yeah. The whole conceit of the thing, I just couldn't wrap my head around either, because they say, they're like, well, we can't fight these guys off for you, because as soon as we leave, they're just going to come back and hurt you. So we have to make sure they leave for good. And what they end up doing is not anything, and then they just leave, and it's like, okay, well, they could come back with like another ship and just blow the fuck out of this place.
Yeah.
There's a scene at the end where they're hiding up in the mountains, or the mountains, like hills, really. light hills.
The small landfill, in southern LA.
And they're all looking down they've got the high ground. They've got the Klingons who are walking up towards them, and I'm just like, just fucking shoot them. This would be done.
Yeah.
This is not a Star Trek thing, is not to shoot these guys, but obviously they are bad enough dudes that they need to be dealt with, and there's only one way to not ever have them come again, is you just gotta kill them.
Yeah.
But this is such a conflict-less episode. Like the the Klingon Marauders don't even really do anything. They just
There's no
kinda
reason
show
that
up
they're
when
Klingons. They are.
Yeah.
I would say they're actually antithetical to Klingons. I don't believe that Klingons would act like this. Really, like they. I felt that it was a mistake to use them, and the only way that I can see saving this episode, if you want to keep the general bones intact, is that you have to play up the Klingon angle. I think a little bit. Like the Klingons either have to do something damaging at the end, or you have to kind of hint at the fact that human and Klingon relationships going forward in the timeline is not going to be good, and like maybe this is one of the reasons why. But it comes down to the plot against them makes so little sense, where they trap them in fire, and it's like, well, they can just beam out, and then after 2 minutes they do beam out, and it's like, well, you didn't save any. Now they're just going to nuke you from up in their space station and then move on and call it a day. It's like, what the hell?
They have a starship. They can target you from space and shoot you and kill you very easily.
and because the only way that I think you can save that, which they don't do any service to at all, is that you have to dishonor the Klingons or make them think that what they're doing is dishonorable, so that they have a reason why they won't kill you that way.
Sure.
And because they don't treat these aliens like Klingons, which is that they're stealing in a kind of. I thought this was actually a better episode for Ferengi would fit better in what's going on here. Like this feels like a very Ferengi storyline. The Klingons don't really, the way that they're acting doesn't strike me as Klingon. It doesn't make sense for the way that the story has to resolve. And at the end, if you don't play up the weakness, the silver bullet weakness of what the Klingons have, there's no reason to not expect that they would just come back, because Larry Cedar yelling at them doesn't seem like it would intimidate real Klingons away from ever coming back to this place.
Yeah, this episode is actually it's actually kind of racist towards Klingons, if you let me finish that, because the only reason that they use the Klingons in this episode is preconceived notions about what Klingons are, because they look scary and because they're known to be violent. Nothing they do in this episode shows them to be either of those things. It's just a cheap storytelling cop-out.
Yep.
The same way you would use any. Obviously, it's not as bad because the Klingons are a fictional race, but I don't need to caveat that, I hope. But
they're real to me.
The same way you would. What's that?
They're real to me. They're real to so many of our listeners.
It's just it's similar to a way you would use any other race as a shorthand stereotype, where it's like, well, these there's preconceived notions about how these certain people or certain alien races are, and so we're just going to leave. I feel like I'm digging myself a hole making this comparison, so I'm going to bail out. But it's just a shorthand, I think, because nothing they do in this episode is really bad. You don't see them doing anything bad. You hear them talk about taking this deuterium or whatever the hell it was called.
Yeah. They killed people the first time they showed up. That's all the way.
I guess that's what they talk about, but if they don't do it again.
Yeah.
We don't see them. There's no conflict in this episode. There's no direct head-to-head drama. It's just they show up and they're like, "Arr," and then they leave, and then they come back, and then they don't shoot at each other, and then nobody gets killed. And I don't know. It's very safe.
But I would say
also, I loved the Vulcan self-defense thing they get taught, where it's like, this will work perfectly as long as they strike at you exactly in this one manner, which they all seem to do. So maybe I'm the dumb one.
It's the thing where they talk up because I would maybe agree with you about the shorthand thing, except I think that the shorthand that they do here is actively undermined through the episode, and I don't think you need shorthand for what is, to me, shorthand in the first place, where it could be any race that comes down and is just like, you give us this thing, and it's basically a mafia shakedown. Like, you give us this for, they don't even mention protection, but it's like, you just have to give us this stuff and no one can help you. And the way that they undermine it is that I think that what they do as characters, the Klingons undermine what I understand to be shorthand for Klingons, which is that they're super violent and dangerous, but they also have this sort of backbone of honor that you can play against. And it's undermined in the action sequences by, you can't talk up the Klingons and have it be like an incredibly, what they're supposed to be at this point is an incredibly dangerous warrior race. But 45-year-old women can just roll around like it's Dark Souls around them, and they can't hit them with a bat'leth. And it's like, well, they look like clowns in this case. So, you know, it got me thinking into a weird headcanon space where I'm like, are these guys supposed to be? Because I think T'Pol brings up like the High Council doesn't deal with these guys. Are these supposed to be like outcast Klingons who don't embrace being a Klingon or something? They don't really dig into that, but it felt like that was necessary to explain why they're so stupid and why they're so lame.
Yeah, no, you don't get enough time to do any of that. The real way this episode should play out is they should come back and absolutely slaughter the entire town. Yeah, and then Archer be like, "Whoa, these guys are way more intense than I thought they were."
The season finale is Archer returning to this place and just picking up the decapitated head of the leader here of this place.
It ends with him back on Enterprise. Calling up the admiral going like, hey, I'm not going to say why, but these Klingons might be serious business. Maybe we might want to keep an eye on these guys.
And it doesn't make in sequence because Archer's already had episodes where he's played the Klingons' honor against themselves. And I know that you don't want to repeat the same storyline over and over again, but honestly, I feel a good portion of my problem with the motivations of this one is if it was just a ragtag group of space pirates who are doing this, like some new alien group or something like that. It seems like it makes more sense.
But I think there it's exposing how bland of an episode it is because the Klingons are there for Star Trek trappings. Like I think you're right. I think it would be more interesting as a Ferengi episode, but the Ferengi are not known as badass killers.
Right.
So you need a race where if they're not going to do anything, you have to believe that these guys mean business, and the Klingons are the only ones that they can really use at this point. Yeah,
because the Suliban wouldn't work. It wouldn't really make sense or anything. And
yeah, could you imagine if they're down there on that planet and then like this 5 of those like goopy looking Suliban, rubbery looking Suliban guys come down and they're like, oh my god, they're back. The massive killing group.
Archer's been traumatized by the Suliban. He brings it up here. That's the
Oh, I'm sorry. I got the Suliban mixed up in my head. I was thinking of that one episode with like those weird rubbery guys.
Oh, the Suliban can. Oh, the ones on the horror sequence where they're on the ship.
I don't know why I immediately went to those for Suliban. Obviously, Suliban are the ones with the weird faces.
Well, the Suliban can stretch too. They can like slide under doors and stuff. So you're not totally. They are somewhat rubbery in nature.
They just come back and they demand all this fuel, and they watch all of us pee from under the door, and it's very weird because they can just slip under the crack of the door, and I don't like it.
Archer brings up the Suliban in this one just as I guess an emotional thread that's supposed to be tied in here where he's going to stick up and not let people be bullied and things like that.
Is the conceit of this episode still like semi-serialized? Like, are they still repairing the ship at this point? Or is the stuff that they need just
I think so. I think so. I assumed it was. I assumed it was a tie-in from the last episode where things broke after they got repaired for the first time. I think they're still going off of that. Archer, I generally like the way that Archer's set up here, I suppose. I like the idea of him being against bullies, and I think that kind of works for a humanity first in space story that like Archer's backstory is. There's really not much else to say about it. That's just the way that the episode runs through it. It tries to provide a little bit of motivation that Archer needs to verbalize why he's sticking up for these guys out of everybody. The kid's story felt the same. You have stories like that in this episode, but it felt completely detached from anything, and the bond that Trip makes with this kid doesn't make sense over the course of 3 seconds that he spent time with him. The kid doesn't even really play into the Klingon story at all. He's just there as a little side story to attach to things, and it just felt empty. It's too little story, and I don't know why the show still has a problem with this. It's like they're past the first season. They're still making the same mistake. It's just this. It's a consistent thing, I think, with Enterprise where they almost underestimate the amount of narrative that has to be in this, or the amount of like secondary story or subtext to things, like you got to add a twist to this somehow. You got to add some kind of depth to this that is either giving Archer a conflict, or if you want to heighten the storyline with the kid and Trip, but it's just not there, and it's very flat the entire time.
Yeah, I don't know how much there really is to talk about it, because it's they play it completely straight, and like you're saying, they don't really add anything, or there's no subtext or subplot or anything. It's just a pretty straightforward, you know, we gotta protect this town from ruffians. How do you feel about T'Pol and her agreeing with Archer that they should step in and do something here? Because that I couldn't decide if that was out of character or not.
I didn't like it. Well, I don't know if I didn't like it. I didn't really accept it as it was happening. I didn't understand why she would say that, but I think that the bigger problem that I think T'Pol in that case is a part of is that there's no POV from the Enterprise crew. Like, Archer has the bare minimum of, I don't like people kicking other people around, and I'm going to stop them from doing that. T'Pol kind of fits into that line where she has to go along with it, or the episode is unwilling to give her a little bit of a contradictory take on what's going on. It's not even... It almost feels like they just want to sweep the whole Prime Directive thing under the rug and just be like, Archer can interfere. This is fine. Like, even T'Pol's cool with it, so everyone knows that this is okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly, this isn't a Prime Directive thing, because obviously they have contact with...
But they mentioned that, and Archer brings that up in this one, doesn't he? Like, his thing is, the show is actively avoiding you even questioning. This is not a concern about whether or not we should interfere. There's like no legal reason we shouldn't interfere. There's no moral reason. We're just going to do it.
Yeah. It just felt it kind of felt out of place for me. I wish T'Pol had like brought more of like a hard-lined logical argument to it, where it's like, I agree with you, we do need to step in, but only because the Klingons are hampering the production of this thing that people need, or some shit like that, where it's like, okay, well, you're not exactly doing this out of the goodness of your heart as much as you are because you think it makes sense to do it. Which I think, that could be an interesting through line, especially for the time, if you want to get into foreign intervention in desert-based societies that
they're drilling
for the planet.
Well, that's the other. Imagine, like, the other problem with that is, imagine if this is just an allegory for Middle East oil or something like that, and
you can tell that it is by all the white people in this.
The incredible amounts of sand and the amount of white people.
For another desert episode, it is the whitest cast I've ever seen.
Yeah, Larry Cedar definitely is a sunblock addict, I would assume, while shooting this. He's not someone who tans well, I don't think. If this is a Middle East allegory, they're drilling for oil, and they get a bunch of oil, and everyone wants oil because it's how you make your car run. How is there no protection for this? Like, how is a small... It's like if it was Iraqi oil fields and just some SUV full of guys could drive in one day and just be like, give us all your oil, and they were completely unable to stop it from happening. I mean,
technically that did happen eventually once ISIS got their shit together, but...
at least there's more than a carload, I suppose. And they're not just taking... Like, that was ISIS would be like if the Klingons just stayed there and took up camp, like they took it over. The Klingons are just like, give us this stuff and we're going to leave. Yeah. And I think the episode makes some line that the leader has some line. He's like, our ships don't work or we can't send a communication or something. It's some nonsense just to get around the fact that they can't defend themselves. And
it's also like the Klingons at the end, they're like, well, we can get this stuff at a lot of different places. We don't have to come back here. Then what's the point of all this?
The Klingon leader had a couple lines that I thought starting off were sarcastic, but eventually I wondered if it was actually the driving reason he comes, where he's like, I love your hospitality. I love hanging out with you.
Like, imagine if you're on, this is going to be a very niche cultural reference for Wes and I, but imagine if you're on like Route 1 and you go to, you pull into McDonald's, and they're like, we're sorry, we don't have enough food for you because the same 5 guys keep coming and ruining all of our McDonald's food. And then you're like, okay, I'll get rid of these 5 guys. And at the end, they're like, well, I can get a cheeseburger literally 2 doors down at Burger King anyway, so I'll see you guys later. And it's like, what the fuck? Why?
Why did I?
Why did anybody do any of this?
Right. Why did we risk our lives for these Big Macs?
Because you really like the fries, right?
Yeah.
You don't like the Burger King fries. You like the McDonald's fries, so you terrorize the McDonald's because you love them, just like in any healthy relationship.
I think that the hospitality thing, which I think is supposed to be a joke from the Klingon, like he's kind of being sarcastic towards them, but the way that it ends there, where he's like, it makes it sound like he was just coming back because he likes these guys and he wants to steal the oil from them.
I was just thinking how much funnier it would be if they went through this whole spiel of this episode and it was just like the Klingons never did anything bad. They actually just really did like the hospitality, but the people there were just like, these guys are the worst guests. They always leave their rooms messy. They never tip our wait staff. Could you please help us kill them and have them never come back? Like that sort of inversion I would think would be fun. I mean, obviously that's really silly, but that's what you need in this story is you need some sort of subversion to this well-worn it's almost like they wrote this down and they're like, okay, this is the outline we're going to work on. The structural outline.
The structure of it.
What we need to do is we need to make this a Star Trek episode, and then they ran out of time, so they were like, oh shit, put some bumps on their foreheads and make the kid really like spaceships.
Yeah.
Even at the end, the whole thing is about them coming down and trying to get this fuel and not having enough fuel because the Klingons are taking all of it and shit. Isn't the way that they end up stopping them by getting them, encircling them in a ball of fire of ignited fuel? The shit that they're mining out of the ground, they just blast it and blow it up. So I don't know. I don't think anybody thought any of this through from a strategy standpoint.
I got real hung up on, you can't trap them in fire, they'll beam out of it. Like there's no danger to any of that.
They should have had them like in the fire and then they go just like
just right
to the left.
And the Klingon finally lets that woman. Yeah.
No, but then they have this stupid thing where they're walking towards them, right? And then they all just, for I guess, I don't know if you want to call it honor or whatever, they throw their weapons down.
Mm-hmm. So
they all throw their guns and their batlets down so they can be unarmed when they walk into this ring of fire. That they're tracking them up the mountain. And they're walking towards them, and then these guys, the good guys, are like, "Oh shit, we're in the wrong place. We need to move over." And then they start going to this way, and then the other guys just start going this way, like exactly with them. So they work them into the right spot, so they can then circle them and fire. I don't know. It's just really stupid.
It is tremendously stupid. The thing about the hospitality, I think, just to bring it up, I think the hospitality angle actually works as a Ferengi thing. The Ferengi, I feel, would be like, it's just because it's supposed to be very mob-like. I just get the like, this is the mafia that's coming in, and it's like, hey, you get this nice place. I love spending time with you. Like, it's a good guy. Like, as you're ripping him off, there's that kind of camaraderie, or fake camaraderie in air quotes. Like the Ferengi fit that, and I think that if you adjust that, where it's almost a cultural misunderstanding, where the Ferengi think that this is kind of an acceptable thing to do, and they're surprised that they get pushback. But that would require adding some kind of thought to it.
Or, I mean, with the Ferengi, you do have that element. I guess they've only met the Ferengi once, and they were fairly aggressive. But like with the Ferengi, you also have that element of these people are being, if you're going to keep it as bloodless as they do, I feel like with the Ferengi, you have the opportunity to be like, this town has become submissive because the Ferengis present as so dangerous and violent. Mm-hmm. Like, because they look, they got the sharp teeth and they look a lot more violent than they are.
Yeah.
So they can come down and present as violent. And then when Archer sees what's going on, he's like, oh no, these guys are pushovers. You just gotta you just flick them in the earlobe and they run away. So in that case, having the town stand up to them, however ill prepared they may be, has a little bit more believability to it, because it's like Archer knows that these guys are pushovers.
Right.
So all you need to do is push back a little bit and they'll go away.
Right. It doesn't run into the you're going to fight off the deadliest wars that they all talk about very extremely easily. And
if the Ferengi are like, don't you push us too hard. We've got a starship up there that can destroy this entire planet if we want to. It's like, no, you don't. The Ferengi don't fly ships like that. So like that, there's that sort of like element that Archer brings to it that actually gives them an upper hand in the situation, other than it just being Archer is the, Yul Brynner role in this episode.
Yeah, it's funny because I like the scene where the leader and Archer are fixing his little machine at night. I thought it was lit really well, interestingly, and I like that actor. Larry Cedar's good. He's on Deadwood for 3 seasons as Leon, and they all like he's a good enough actor. I almost felt that his thing about he's responsible for this town or whatever. Like he's the leader of here, and he feels like a letdown if he can't defend them and everything like that. It was almost enough to carry it. I just thought that scene worked really well. I don't know if you need to hammer it home more than that, but it's just surprising that there's a lack of anything else there. Yeah. Because if it's the Ferengi standing up to them like that, or standing up to the Ferengi, that is a little bit more of like a browbeaten person, like realizing that he can stand up against something. It's just the Klingon thing stands in the way because you're not supposed to be able to stand up against them the way that Archer talks about them.
Yeah, and I may have missed the connective thread because I was a little bit in and out for portions. But I did find he gets heated at Archer. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Very quickly, and for reasons that I couldn't really track.
Just that he doesn't want trouble anymore in these parts.
I guess, but it seemed like even from the first interaction when Archer was like, "Hey, what if we help you out here?" He's like, "No, we can't have people like you coming down here." And it's like, "Well, dude, you've already got people." It just seemed like a fairly artificial conflict built between the two of them. To
be fair, Archer rang his doorbell, didn't get a response, so he kicked the door open and went inside to see what's going on. Yeah, it's
it stood out to me because the other guy is like, actually, this is a pretty fair deal. I think
that's a weird scene.
These guys, yeah,
that opening.
He's just like, no, we can't do it. It's like I don't understand what the heat is here.
That opening scene is strange. I don't even know if it's before the cold open. I don't think it's not. It's after the cold open. But the
cold open is as unremarkable as the episode.
Yeah, is that a Klingon ship? No, it's a shuttle. They go, okay.
Yeah, it's just they're fixing their tent at Fire Festival, and then someone lands in the shuttlecraft. Yeah,
the opening scene is just it's the opening scene is weak between the two alien characters who are talking to T'Pol and Archer because they want to demonstrate that there's conflict between the two groups and that this is not going to go smooth. But at the same time, they need Archer and the crew to get invested in the story. So one of the after the Leon character is like, get the fuck out of here. Like, we don't want any part like that. You don't want any part of this. The other guy, his like second in command, is like, can you guys fix our stuff? and then they go and fix it. And it's just this real weird dichotomy where the first guy's yelling at him saying like, get out of here. Like, this is the least friendly place you've ever been. And the second guy's like, oh, maybe you can hang around with us for a little bit and that'll be good.
Yeah, he's screaming at them to leave when they're fixing all their broken stuff and giving them free, super advanced medical supplies.
Yeah.
Just like, you can't do this.
Yeah. Oh, and a very strange Phlox scene, because the Phlox scene makes you think that this woman's going to tell Phlox that she has been abducted by these guys and is being held as like a stalker. Like, what Phlox is trying to get to, he's like, are you all right? What's happening here? You seem very quiet. And he's just giving her medical supplies, but it's just... there's nothing else there. That woman is just wants the medical supplies.
The way that he gets so heated, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was something like the Klingons actively are holding the guy's wife hostage or something.
Yeah.
Like that's a good third act reveal to kind of shift the stakes a little bit, where it's like the reason that they let them do this is because they came down and they took hostages.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, and it's been years since he saw his wife or whatever.
Yeah.
Or his son or daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just nothing. Just played totally straight.
No, it's the same. I guess they must have starships or something. They must have a way to get off of there, but it's, the more you think about it, the stranger is like these colonists just get robbed blind by the Klingons, but they continue to work for them. Like there's no, if the Klingons had the guy's wife, you would understand why they continue to drill for this oil to give it to them, just so that they can maintain some sort of like status quo here where they're not going to get hurt anymore. But why don't you just pack up and leave? Let the Klingons dig up their own deuterium or whatever. Like, you don't seem to be getting anything out of staying here. You're just working all year, and then apparently they have winters, and they have to survive on the corn that they've saved up through the winter, and they can barely get by. It's just it's a Western thing that works in a Western genre. You can kind of see it more, but when it's in a Star Trek space world where a starship can just get you the hell out of there and you can go somewhere else and do something, it seems weak. Especially because Archer makes fun of the condition of their camp, and it's like, this place is a shithole. So it's not like they want to live there.
I feel like they would have had equal success if they had just broken down the whole town, because obviously it's like modular and they can do that. Just moved it for like 2 weeks. Yeah. And then when the Klingons came back and there's nobody there, they go, well, there's nobody here. I guess they left. Yep. Well, that's the end of this town. We're off. And like, they're never going to come back.
It showed that worked in this because Mayweather can just get out of scanning range of the Klingon ship. You can just go on the other side of the planet. So
I really like that too, where it's like, well, we can't have a Klingon Enterprise space battle, so let's have the ship fly to the other side of the planet.
Anything you
so
really?
They have no idea what's going on down on the planet either.
Anything you really like about this episode? I don't think this episode did anything stand out to me, really.
No,
I don't want to sound. I thought this one was fairly silly, and I think this one like deserves more scorn than something like A Night in Sickbay. This is just lazy, really. Yeah. It's like at least take a big swing and miss, like A Night in Sickbay, where I'm like, oh, that was really terrible, but at least it was like a kind of a fascinating, surreal nightmare of Archer awakening the entire night in sickbay. This episode
had an undercurrent of Archer's sexual repression, then maybe it would have been more interesting.
Archer's just very frustrated about he wants to take things back and make things his own. Let's take a break then.
I can't figure out what to do about these Klingons with all these women around. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm losing my mind.
Just could she be wearing a tighter jumpsuit, Trip? Is it possible?
You just let her walk around like this? Are there no cultural codes on this planet?
T'Pol's battling that Klingon on the ground, and Archer's just licking his lips, standing over. He's just like, oh, this is good. All right, let's take a break then.
T'Pol, don't fight like that. T'Pol, you want me to do something about it. Jesus Christ, Archer!
Don't just lead me on, woman. We'll take a break. We'll play a clip from the episode. We'll come back. We'll read some patron thoughts. There's only a few of them, and then give our final thoughts.
Do they have anything on Vulcan like blue balls? Actually, yes, Captain, we do. We don't have sex for 7 years.
Our entire this whole attitude
based around blue balls.
this whole attitude and persona we built around ourselves is directly related. All right, so we'll come back with final thoughts about Marauders.
Must be over 1,000 liters here.
2,000.
Our deal was for 200.
Our deal was for power cells, medical supplies, and repair work. You provided us with much more than that.
Besides, we seem to have a surplus for the moment.
Give your crew our thanks.
Have a good season.
All right, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. If you want to support the show, additionally, you can go to patreon.com/thepenskyfile. It's the best way to support us by giving a couple dollars a month. You get extra stuff like extra podcasts and behind-the-scenes stuff. You get the polls to vote on what we talk about. You get the Star Trek revisits and the Star Trek commentary videos. And always, our Captain tier supporters get a special thank you, special shout-out. So thank you to Christian Pouch, Tark Latif, Chris Tinsley, Mike Burnett, Sean, Cardinal Doomsday, Joint Mango, Matt Cutler, Ben Douglas, Neil Brennan, Cal Barrett, Samuel Custer, Nick Sergey, Bradley Killens, Matthew Ross, Arun Vendler, Nathan Elliott, Eric Johnson, Andrew Cholog, Grim Santo, Poindexter G, Dwayne Hackett, Jordan Cooper, Derek Zajac, Russell Elwich, Kevin Reyes, Vault 13 Hero, Stefan Minton, Darth Moss, H28, Mad Curry 6, Jacob 123, Mike Harris, Jakey's Gamer, Patrick Seba, Captain Brazen, Kevin Lowry, Eric Santuan, Corey Martin, William Scheisler, and Timothy Cooley. Thank you guys very much for supporting the show. Much appreciated. Patron thoughts about Marauders. Is this the first one? It is. If you're a $5 supporter, you can leave your thoughts about upcoming episodes. We read them. Thomas Darnell says, I'm a sucker for Seven Samurai tropes, so I really enjoyed this. But the problems are obvious, like the miners really depended on the Enterprise crew in that standoff. They'll never have a chance if the Klingons return. Why did the Klingons give up like an after-school special bully? They could have tactically beamed out of the flames and behind enemy lines, for one thought amongst many. And deuterium, this hardly seems like the best way to get it, but what do I know here in the 21st century? A high 3.
My favorite version of the teaching a town's worth of people to fight in like an hour and a half is an Army of Darkness, where Ash, who is an idiot from the 20th century, teaches a village full of medieval people who probably all know how to fight a lot better than him. 2 very rudimentary like stick fighting moves.
Yep.
That I don't even know. He probably made them up on the spot, but they all nail it, and it helps them beat back the forces of the undead very effectively.
This one gave us a chance to get another shot of Travis Mayweather in tight clothing for his training sequences, which is if the show's going to do anything with him, it seems that that's his role.
That would be the best subversion if Archer was finally like, T'Pol, I don't know if I can fight these feelings for you anymore, and she's like, thank you, but I'm actually kind of into Mayweather. Have you seen that guy without a shirt on? I feel like if we're going like, he's probably up to my level, whereas you are not, unfortunately.
Yeah, they should have just beamed Mayweather down to show off to the Klingons, and the Klingons would have run away at that point. Yeah, it's just frontline him.
Oil him up, give him a couple knives. They would run away.
Matt Ross says, how many times is the Seventh Samurai Magnificent Seven going to be remade? We've seen this story so much, and Enterprise adds nothing to the formula. There was an opportunity here with Trip and Archer to disagree, but it was waved away too fast. I do have to wonder if there was an order to make T'Pol's outfit tighter than cellophane. I can't believe Phlox gave away the caulking gun. How can they fix the showers? Thank you very much. Kyle Barrett says, Marauders, a perfectly perfunctory, if not middling, retelling of Seven Samurai, which is almost an obligatory story for any genre show to adapt at this point. To give a Star Trek twist to a well-worn tale, I would have preferred the fighting at the end to be about dishonoring the Klingons rather than simply besting them. They should have leaned into the idea that they only needed to make the Klingons look foolish and like bad warriors to have them running off with their tails between their legs. I guess they kind of do that, but they should have focused on it to stop the episode from feeling so generic. The Klingons here could have been any race, acting simply like a gang of Western goons. 2.5 out of 5. Point Extra G says
they should have gotten Eli Wallach to be the lead Klingon. So
who's he?
He was the lead bad guy in Magnificent Seven. You know, just a nice Jewish guy playing a stereotypical Mexican in a 1960s Western. So would have fit right in.
Would have fit in as a Klingon. Point SG says, Enterprise was going for a Seven Samurai Magnificent Seven here, but what they ended up is closer to the Three Amigos or A Bug's Life, which doesn't mean it's bad. It's a decent episode. It did a serviceable job of telling a story we've seen many, many times before. It really didn't do anything new, and I don't see the resolution really scaring the Klingons away. No one likes the Klingon resolution here. Woodrow says, Marauders, a well-crafted and well-acted episode all around, but the makeup was a big miss. I was very unimpressed with the bland alfalfa hair, sprout foreheads, and the indistinguishable Klingons. These Klingons clearly have broken scanners, or they would have seen the Enterprise, miners, or deuterium. I wish their transporter was as inoperable because the Marauders beaming out of the combat was not as climactic as the harrowed retreat to their shuttle would have been. 3 permanent bans from Stovacor out of 5.
I'm really interested in the reactions to this one, actually, because they're being a lot more diplomatic about it than I think I'm going to be. Wrapping up.
Latte Librarian says, this might be the first episode of Enterprise I actually enjoyed. Continuing your theme.
Wow.
For once, their meddling doesn't seem ill-advised, and Trip's paternal instincts were cute. Ignoring the plot holes and the unconvincing fight choreography, it was a pretty good episode. I like the callback to when Hoshi was having trouble learning how to shoot with the weapon, and showing that she's more competent and comfortable with it now. I also enjoyed seeing Phlox's starfish leech, the crew keeps mentioning. 4 copies of Enterprise schematics out of 5. 4 out of 5, wow, interesting. And then Neil Brennan with a final comment. As soon as I heard Archer intone, there's a saying on my world, I knew it was going to be a teach a man to fish thing. Either that or there's a saying on my world. I've started my own podcast.
Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet-ass pussy.
T'Pol's flared white jumpsuit, still skin tight, of course, is very 70s, which makes it stand out since everything else here is so 1990s Trek. But this is made in 2002, so time for a refresh, surely. 1 Disco Inferno out of 5. So Neil went hard at the end there.
If we can,
thank you, patrons.
I'm just curious. You can do this on Discord, if you want to, if you can leave it in a Can they send messages independent of reviews? Because I'm curious. I would like to know what if you had to pick 3 things that make a good episode of Enterprise, what would they be? Because I don't think this is a good episode. I find it to be very lazy. I find it to be very uninteresting. There's no character work in it that I find engaging.
Yeah.
And they misuse the Klingons. And ultimately the action sequence and resolution at the end is really unsatisfying. Yet a lot of people seem to find this to be one that is above average, or average or above.
Average or above. Yeah, average. I would be fair and say they think it's average. Yeah.
And I'm curious what to them makes a good Enterprise episode and what makes a bad Enterprise episode, because I'm gonna give this one a 1, because I think if we're working by Enterprise rating logic, this is there's nothing wrong with the production. There's really nothing wrong with the bones of the story that they decided to tell, but that stuff and the acting is fine. But that stuff aside, it's just like you were saying, A Night in Sickbay is way more interesting and way more memorable than this, which is just the most throwaway episode I can ever imagine.
Yeah. You're gonna give it a 1. I think to stick to me, I'm glad you gave it a 1. It'll bring the average down for us. Like I think I have to give this a low 2, just because it's functional. Like I think that A Night in Sickbay is a 1 just because it's a strange, like if you were to describe both of these or to watch both of them, I think you walk away from Night in Sickbay going like, that was what a strange decision to do that one. Sure. Where Marauders is not really that. It's like you get it, but it's incredibly low effort. I'll give it a 2. It'll knock down the average. I think this is a terrible episode, though.
I would have given it a 2, but I'm giving it a 1 because I'm disappointed.
I wonder if I could. I mean, because the thing that I think is comparable is Sleeping Dogs, which is another Klingon episode in the first season, the one where the ship is stuck in the planet's atmosphere and they beam down and they kind of walk around. I feel that one's more similar, although I feel that one was even more exciting than Marauders, because there's this kind of thing of you don't know what's going to happen on the Klingon ship once they're down there. And here, immediately from the get-go there's only one way that this is going to play out, unless this maybe would have been a great episode if the Klingons had like wiped out the colonists at the end, and Archer's like, well, I learned my lesson about trying to stick up to the Klingons, but they don't do that. I'll give it a 1. I really didn't like this one. I thought it was lazy. And
yeah, that's the thing. It's like, it's too, I feel like it's too early in the series run to be doing what we need to do? What if we did a Western? Let's all do and then not that inclination is fine, but yeah, they just don't. I guarantee you, if you found an interview of someone talking about this episode, what they would say is, we're all just big fans of Westerns, and we just really wanted to do a Western. It's like, okay, yeah, that's what you say in like season 8. Right. You're running out of ideas. And it's like, well, we never did a musical episode and everybody on the show knows how to sing. So that's why we wrote in this alien virus that makes everybody break out into song. It's like, no, you're 7-10 episodes. How many episodes are we into season 2?
6. This is the 6th. Yeah.
You're 6 episodes into your 2nd season and you're wasting an hour on a uninspired Magnificent 7 retread that adds absolutely nothing to your story. I don't know. I can't give it a pass. I'm sorry.
What's the defense? Is there a defense of this one that this is a good Enterprise story? So in terms of where Enterprise exists in the timeline and what Enterprise is trying to do as a prequel series, is there, I suppose you could make the argument that Archer's story here is the central thing about it's the Federation sticking up for the oppressed, And it's this understanding that by working together, you are going to strengthen everybody so that these outside marauders can't come in and sort of take advantage of you. It's the strength in numbers idea that the Federation eventually is going to become. The problem there is that it's not subtextual to anything. Like it's brought up by a sort of happenstance, or there's nothing interesting to push back against the idea of why maybe this is a conflicting choice for Archer to make at that point. Like why there's no downside to it. So that's the best I have. And I'm not even convinced by this argument. I just think that that's like, it's the weakest of connections is to just say that this is an Enterprise episode because it's about Archer spreading his own personal goodwill that will eventually become the goodwill that encompasses the Federation's values.
Yeah. Well, I also think that they undermine, if that's what you're going for, I think they undermined it by playing it so straight where it's like we need to learn how to fight and shoot in order to defend ourselves from these people. Because if like, I think it would be interesting if they got down there and the Klingons were doing what they're doing and everybody in this town was like, we just need the right guns. We need guns and we need weapons and we can blast these guys back. And Archer's like, all right, I'm down with what you're saying here. Obviously, you guys are being oppressed by these people and taken advantage of. But I don't know if that's the way you want to handle this, because you're just going to shoot at them and then they're going to shoot back and people are
they're just going to come back. Archer's logic is they're just going to come back. Like, yeah, there's more of them.
It would be an interesting subversion if, like, when the Klingons come back, they do the thing where it's like, oh, they've walked into the trap and they're sending them towards a very specific thing. And what they send them towards is like a town hall meeting or something where Archer's like, hi guys, listen, we really need to talk about what's going on here and like solve it diplomatically or something. Yeah. Something just to invert it. Cause I mean, this, like I was saying, this story is a story about obviously rising up and pushing back your oppressors, but it's always a very violent one. Yep. It's always the core of the story, if you go back to Magnificent Seven and Seven Samurai, is a town hiring killers to come in and kill the people who are threatened to kill them. That's not how Star Trek works. So if you want to make this a Star Trek story, the answer is solving it without violence, solving it with some, if you're going for, oh, this is the future of Starfleet working together, that's how you end the story. You don't end the story by threatening to kill them and they run away. Yep. You end it by coming to some sort of diplomatic solution that works for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's just what we were saying, what Kyle said with his comment. Like you have to hit the Klingons' honor sensibility here to cause them to not come back. And if you do that, you can have an episode where the Klingons actually kind of realize and learn a lesson that what they're doing is like, because they're basically just stealing from. I would have to assume Klingons would see this as dishonorable in some way because they're not. Mm-hmm. They're not killing these people and taking their stuff, which I think the Klingons would see as honorable. Like that's a good way to go about things. They're just sort of enslaving them to make stuff for them, you know, and that's why I think it works better as a Ferengi story, because I think that feels more like a dark side of capitalism, if you want to go to that. Like it's, you know, it's that kind of a thing. The Klingons don't feel that way. And this feels that Archer could convince these guys. He's like, listen, it's true Klingon warriors. Or he notifies the homeworld and the homeworld sends other Klingons who are like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, this isn't the way that you need to be acting. And, you know, something like that. It's a better resolution.
And with the Ferengi too, this necessitates a better understanding of the Ferengi, which they don't have at this point. But with the Ferengi, I think it opens you up to a diplomatic ending because you can barter with them. Right. So if you present the idea that the Ferengi are now backed into a corner, and now you're like, listen, I think if they had set it up that the village is missing something very vital to their survival, and also being oppressed by the Ferengi, and then the Ferengi have that thing that they need. Yeah. I think you could end the story with them hashing it out with the Ferengi and coming to a conclusion that's good for everybody.
Yeah, everyone wins.
The Ferengi are going to make a deal, and they're going to stick by the deal. Yeah, you know, it's a two-way street deal kind of thing. I think that would actually be a more interesting way to play it. I think
it is. Yeah, and that cements Archer as a bridge builder that I think he's supposed to symbolize. He's supposed to symbolize bringing disparate cultures together.
Especially if you've got that scene where he's like, I just don't like bullies. I don't like being pushed around. And then T'Pol's like, you know, I agree. I think we need to help these people, but I think maybe we should think about the way we go about doing this.
Yeah.
Because is this a situation where you feel like you need to bring violence to the situation, or can we look at this a little bit more rationally and come up with a better solution that isn't just you flying off the handle and starting to shoot people?
Yeah. No, agreed. That's the big problem with it. I would say I'll give it a 1. You'll give it a 1. Patrons disagree and give it a slightly higher score. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. If you want to support the show, patreon.com/thepenskyfile. All the links are down below at thepenskyfile.com/links, and all the social media. You can join the Discord if you want to join the conversation there. There's a link to the Discord server. And Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, we've got a new Rotten Horror Picture Show coming out this week. We're doing Candyman. And we're actually also doing a bit of a Patreon fundraising drive, sort of, going into Halloween, because Amanda and I would love to do some Patreon content where we cover horror franchises that are probably not on our list in their entirety. So, for instance, the Friday the 13th series, or the rest of Nightmare on Elm Street, or Halloween, or something like that, which we will not be covering because they're not in our list. But in order to do that, we have to hit a certain goal on our Patreon page. So if you want to help us out, you can check that out at the patreon.com/thepenskyfile.
Mm-hmm. So once we hit that goal amount, these guys will have an extra podcast per month, basically.
As an incentive to all you Star Trek fans out there who might not be huge horror movie fans, if we hit that goal, it gets us very much within striking distance of the Voyager goal, where Wes and I will do the entirety of Voyager. So if you like putting us through hell more than you like listening to horror movie podcasts, that might also be an incentive for you as well.
A year of hell. I thought you were going to say that you were just going to call the Candyman Kern the entire episode to get Star Trek people invest. Tony Todd plays Worf's brother.
Sure.
I guess that's it.
If I had been cognizant of that enough when we recorded it, I would have done that.
we can release the Patreon Star Trek version where we just bleep out every time and replace it with a Kern. So check out the Patreon. You can do that. Once we get to that goal, you get an extra podcast a month, and that brings us within striking distance of Voyager, which is not really close, but it's coming up relatively soon. Thank you guys very much. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.